All right, you got about 7 seconds left again.
7 seconds left. Okay, cool. All right, and here we are on Facebook, and we're coming on board with People's Internet Radio. Okay, are we there?
You're on.
Okay, good morning, afternoon, or evening, my friends in Dublin, Ireland. This is 9 o'clock Irish time, depending where you are. I am Emily Windsor Craig, and this is where I'm at every Saturday at 1 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And this is October the 17th, 2020. History Reset is brought to you each Saturday to bring valuable information to the public that corporate media refuse to divulge. Academia likewise, okay? This program is a public service, but please donate to People's Internet Radio to keep the people's truth coming at you without commercial adverts. Today's topic in History Reset is overkill. And oh my, what I have walked into here. All right, overkill. Overkill is population reduction. Overkill is genocide, and it's omnicide due to carelessness, and it has a long, long history. And so how do I get off talking about a history that happened 5 million years ago? Okay, well, I've been at this a while, all right? First of all, I have a long, long memory because I am an old soul, all right? And so through the 50, 60 years I've been studying this, I've been combing through libraries to find the books that match what my soul memories are. And so you have a list in front of you, if you're on the Facebook timeline, of the 5 books that I'm going to be talking about today, and they're in more or less a chronological order. And if you want to retrace my steps, how I learned what I have figured out, cutting and pasting and pulling this together, you're welcome to follow the steps in the books. Now, the first book took me 40 years to find, and it has to do with the planetary sovereign of this world, who is described in book number 3, the Urantia book, as the planetary sovereign. All right. And he's the guy where the buck stops. He's the one who's stuck with the outcomes of history. And what we know from all 5 of these books is he has a name, and sometimes it's the Tetragrammaton, or it's Jehovah, or it's Jehovah, or it's Yahweh, all right? And he's the one who interacted with the Hebrews because the ascension process was no longer working. And so he interacted with the Hebrews to create a second process that would spare or save some of the souls of some of the people who live and die on this world. Now, what is salvation? What does it mean when a soul gets saved? It took a long time for that to surface. And what it means is Yahweh has the capacity to save to disk his interactions with other souls so that he can refer to them later and later and later and later. And so my history is kind of similar to his. I was a sylph in the beginning, and Yahweh is a sylph. And I have put a picture of a couple of sylphs up on the timeline, okay? A sylph is a disincarnate ball of energy that can operate any kind of physical vehicle, all right? And I'm real old, and I started out, I don't know if it was the same time, but in roughly the same quadrant of time. So I have a history of Yahweh going way, way back. And we were not friends. We were not friends. That's the first thing I'm going to tell you. That my history with him is in the right use of will by Ceanne DeRohan. And what happened in the beginning when Shechainah would not cooperate with Yahweh as a marriage mate and split up from him was that Yahweh produced the, as they say in the church, only begotten. You know the concept of only begotten. Yahweh somehow created the Alpha and Omega by himself without a mate. And so Alpha was completely right brain dominant, and Omega, who became the Christ, is completely left brain dominant. Each of them was one half of Yahweh's cognitive capacity. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, as it turns out, Alpha, the right brain dominant offspring, only begotten offspring of Yahweh, fragmented and never reassembled. In all the years of creation, she has never reassembled. And during the force and trouble of our world and its history of overkill by not only by the galaxy policies in the Alanu Treaty, but also by miscellaneous ETs who come here and abduct people, Yahweh also fragmented into a half a dozen different fragments, which he has recently reconsolidated. All right, so he is a personal person, a personal guy who, like me, is kind of slow, like Moshe was kind of slow to speak and cognitively slow, but understand whatever we understand at the gut level first, and then we have a problem to figure out how to articulate it. We're not like spirits, pure spirits like the domain, who can think and talk and articulate and figure all at once. Have you ever heard Ben Shapiro talk about something? Okay. Or Catherine Austin Fitz, or Ashiana Dean. I mean, these people speak like a machine gun, and that's because their cognitive sentience is in the mind, in the intellect, and so they have instant access to articulation. Whereas some races, and I belong to one of them, are slower to figure out what they're thinking than we are to figure out what we feel first, and then we think about what we felt. All right. And so there are different cognitive styles, and that's why IQ varies from race to race, because different races have different rates of cognitive recognition. And I'm not quick. And you know I'm not quick, and I don't apologize. All right. So Yahweh is, according to the Urantia book and the OSPI and the Bible, the sovereign, the planetary sovereign here. Now let me go into the Urantia book and give you the Urantia books, because it goes into the details of the hierarchy. The Urantia books' sense of who Yahweh is and what he's like. Yahweh, anthropomorphic, of greater religious value than a remote absolute, believed to have created both good and evil, erupted on Mount Horeb, caused the Bedouins to fear him. The golden calf was originally supposedly a symbol of his. He has been growing in concept. He designates the completed concept of sovereignty, The Jewish concept was clear-cut, personal, and moral. And that's the point I wanted to get to. That Yahweh is personal. He is not a concept. He is not a principle. He is not a list of commandments on the wall. He's a being who experiences thoughts, feelings, wit, and memory. And because of the galactic policy of overkill that is described in this book, okay, the galactic policy of overkill. Let's go into, and this one is in the Civil Life and Galactic History, God versus Hierarchy. 25 million years ago, the first seeding of the angelic race took place in this galaxy in the Lyran system. That seeding of angelic hominids was destroyed during the electric wars 5.5 million years ago. Then there was a second seeding, and it was destroyed in the 1,000 Years' War. After that, there was a treaty, the El-Anu Treaty arrived at, an agreement between some of the fallen and Anu Elohim races and the Emerald Covenant races, the Christos founders races, that an attempt for a third seeding on the planet would not be opposed. Now, these factions are Anunnaki factions now, and they still exist. Okay, the Anu Elohim races are the Anunnaki cultural, traditional way of seeing the world. The Christos founders races have policies derived from the universe's laws on good and bad, okay, good and evil. Warring stopped, but in return for seizing the conflict, the Anunnaki, who emigrate by way of their wormwood system into the solar system in which we live, were to do bioregenesis outside the Emerald Covenant. The stipulations in which were that no racial or physical bioregenesis development was to be permitted at all, that races were and are sacrosanct, with superior races and inferior races, with ideological purity and a hierarchical and bureaucratic system of influence that guarantees top-down rulership. Okay, now I want you to think about the implications of what they created here. That the races were not supposed to mix, and if the races mixed, the hybrids had no path to ascension when they were done. And so the racial hybrids could be called at will, they were extra. Okay, just like if you have too many birds in the flock, you start shooting birds. If you have too many fish in the sea, you start fishing. All right. The El-Anu agreement was precedent for today's practice by Alpha Draconians, Orion, and Greys of abducting and utilizing humans and their genomes for their own DNA repair. Okay, we're just consumable products. Okay, that agreement has never been rescinded despite outcomes of suffering and woe that ensouled humans experience from it, because the Christos founders still insist on racial purity. Whether that insistence continues today after the turnover of December 21st, 2012, when we left the authority of the galaxy of Pisces and entered into the authority of the galaxy of Aquarius. Now that I'm not sure yet. The way this insistence plays out is civil society based on Christos founders, that's the fascists, call non-conforming hybrids. There's no such thing as racial tolerance. Emerald Covenant races became the founders of Anunnaki Illuminati doctrines of genocide. I'm losing my voice already. Against racially mixed divergent peoples, permissive ideologies, or dissidents. The rationale for gods to exterminate evolved souls is that they are troublemakers. Therefore, the balance of the population will conform and experience peace. The meek get to inherit the earth. But the outcome is terror and tyranny. No one dares quibble nor question. In the founder's model, whole populations are taken out whose belief systems are harmless, even 11th density and 10th density hominid souls, merely out of preferences of the founders for racial purity. Racial purity, phooey. At the time, Yahweh, the sovereign God, by whose his name is Enlil. That's a very curious thing. Now, you know, Hebrew is the language of the Anunnaki. And the Anunnaki write from left to right. Hebrew is also the language of the Jewish people. And the Jewish write from left to right. So when the Anunnaki came upon the name, the Tetragrammaton for Yahweh that was written from right to left, they read it in their own cuneiform to left to right, and that's how the name Enlil was derived. It's the Tetragrammaton viewed backwards. Okay. Yahweh's bloodline balked at the 10th and 11th density stargates. A holocaust of the innocent. Infighting began, and it spread to the draconians who are predatory by nature, but not pastoral. They had to kill for meat, but they refused to eat 10th and 11th density humans. That was beyond the pale. Yet still being condemned because of their refusal to carry out annihilation orders, they began to stonewall and enact policies of domination against Gate 11 and Gate 10 rebels who felt they were right. You talk about the rebellions that went on, the Satanic rebellion and the Luciferian rebellion. That's what those rebellions were actually about in the beginning. Yahweh's Elohim commissioned the High Council, now called Ancient of Days, the Eli Elohim, asking for relief for draconian raids. The High Council returned, "You're just as out of control as draconians. Sit down and let's settle this." Yahweh's choice to diverge from Christo's founders occurred when he realized he could create an alternative light path, not out of culling nonconformists, but by ordering behavior according to law and only cutting off the truly and incorrigibly harmful. It was a new paradigm in favor of consenting to law over mere racial pride. And this new paradigm was summarily unrecognized by the High Council, even though Yahweh the Creator was acting in his primary capacity to evolve hominids in a new direction, a right and a privilege he enjoys as galactic sovereign. As history has been written, Yahweh's plan was designed to weed out genetic weaknesses and character flaws of Anunnaki crossbred humans until only those who were obedient and biddable to harmless behavior remained to inherit his kingdom sovereignty. That was the goal, okay? Under Enlil's supervision, a dualistic reality would be allowed in which humans would explore choice and have free agency to follow a plan of salvation or not. Degrees of glory were offered. A belief system model of ascendancy would stream humans after mortal death into various levels of responsibility. As such, the plan did not guarantee everyone's redemption. Those less obedient would be denied access to further endowments, thereby sorting the gene pool and giving precedence to those who would most advance the more civil lineage and agenda of shared immortal relationship. All right. So the whole idea of covenant, the Jewish and Christian covenants, are an alternative path to ascension. The path to ascension has been essentially shut down because the races have mixed so much on this world that they have no simple source that they can ascend back to. All right. So if you don't accept a covenant relationship with Yahweh, his son, and the one who has taken the place of Alpha, the Holy Spirit, which is Shechainah, then you don't have access to your common memories with Yahweh. You don't have access to your former identities. You don't have access to the past, and you don't have a path before you to get spared, salvaged again. And that's the primary reason that people bother to get into religion. Now, according to another account, this one. Now we get into how things got really mucked up about 500 years ago. I discovered in the Culbrin Bible that Jesus was born in 1072 AD. But in the Hebrew Bible, Jesus was born in 3 BC. And that tells me we have a problem in our chronology. I don't know how many of you have been following the videos by Flat Earth British and New Earth Sylvia and John, what's his last name? The ones doing the mud flood and showing you the maps and the maps and the maps and the maps of the world where the topology completely changes from map to map as if it was a different world. Like, what? How do we figure this? There's also the problem with dating, because some of the maps have dates that are I-669 or I-587 or J-432, okay? And for some time, scholars have been interpreting that I or J as a 1 so that it's seen as 1669, 1587. And so it's hard to know whether we've gained 1,000 years or not, or lost 1,000 years or not. And so chronology is iffy, let's put it that way. But the problems occurred about 500 years ago when a certain starship crashed here, and its 46 SYLPHS, their souls, came here and began interacting as humans, particularly in the Tartarian and Roman empires, because they were of such a high order. They had such a grasp of ancient technology. They had such a grasp of sacred geometry and architecture that what we see as ruins today, just ruined huge buildings with huge columns and 15-foot floor elevations instead of the usual 10 or 12-foot elevations. It's a whole different society since those SYLPHS got here, and they were called the Domain, that crashed here about 500 years ago, and they have changed history. This is Domain Against Order, Prison Planet Earth, and it's the interview transcriptions of Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, and this is not the version by Lawrence Spence, because he didn't really even interpret the transcriptions or interpret the quotes. He just quibbled over whether it was an ET or not. But if you look at the transcriptions and you look at what this ET said, it's scary. All right, here are some of the things. Government of the old empire, before being supplanted by the Domain, was comprised of beings who possessed a very craven intelligence, very much like the Axis powers during the recent World War. These beings manifested precisely the same behavior as the galactic government that exiled them to internal imprisonment on Earth. They were a gruesome reminder of the ageless maxim that an ISB will often manifest the treatment they have received from others. Kindness fosters kindness, cruelty begets cruelty. One must be able and willing to use force tempered with intelligence to prevent harm to the innocent. However, extraordinary understanding, self-discipline, and courage are required to effectively prevent brutality without being overwhelmed by the malice that motivated the brutality. Only a demonic, self-serving government would employ a logic or science to conceive that an ultimate solution to any problem is to murder and permanently erase the memory of every artist, genius, manager, and inventor, and cast them into prison together with political opponents, thieves, perverts, and disabled beings of galaxy. And that is the mental state and the point of view of the deep state to obliterate, heart attack, disappear, and suicide the creative, truth-telling people among us. And on Facebook, I have a whole page of departed martyrs who spent their lives enlightening humanity about their area of discipline, but they contradicted the official doctrine and dogma of the deep state powers that be, the military industrial complex that Eisenhower spoke of. And so they all died prematurely. That is the same overkill mentality as the Iron Mountain Conference, 1963 through 1967, which concluded and that taught our entire federal bureaucracy that war is necessary, that there's no such thing as good or evil, and that blood sports ought to be allowed, and human trafficking is normal, and the whole totalitarian ethos was presented to the federal bureaucracy and has remained as a faction in our federal bureaucracy in the United States of America, which President Trump is trying to overturn, trying very hard to overturn. And it's why the mainstream media, being a power base monopoly over information, basically supports the people who are keeping the secrets about their behavior. All of the ISBs of India, Egypt, Babylon, Greece, Rome, and medieval Europe were guided to pattern and rebuild the cultural elements of those societies based on standard patterns developed by the ISBs of many earlier similar civilizations in Sun Type 12 Class 7 planets that have existed for trillions of years throughout the universe, all right? So there is a standard operating procedure at the subjective level for getting rid of dissident and non-politically correct members of societies that holds over and above the ethics of the societies themselves. And that's why we haven't been able to get rid of characters like Satan, characters like Lucifer, who from their mercenary ethics get rid of whoever they don't want to have to deal with. That's the whole ethos right there. Whereas the Anunnaki King Nanar said at one time, and it became proverbial, destruction is never a blessing and life itself is never the problem. All right. So that's where we are with this. that we are facing a deep state that is backed up by the Christos founders at the galaxy, who impersonally and bureaucratically and indifferently support population reduction, Agenda 2130, taking all the property away from all the people who have bought and paid and paid and paid and paid to have properties in the country so that they could be close to nature. Being close to nature in the New World Order paradigm is only a privilege of the elite, the rich, the people who know how to wring profits out of business. And that's how it is. So the last book I wanted to refer you to get you some idea of what Yahweh is like as a person. See, I was a fragment and I was in on the domain thing. I don't know how, but I remember parts of it. And so 29 years ago, my life was broken and I got involved in finding God personally, and I was able to do that. And so for a couple of years, I just wrote down everything he said to me. And it came out a very nice coffee table book, speaking in a civil and tactful manner. He explained a lot, and that's diversity in the will of God. That's what I learned from him personally, and that's why I have become the personal advocate of the God of religions, particularly Judaism and Christianity. My problem with the religions is that the bureaucracies in those religions have overstepped their authority, have overstepped the commandments they were given, have become not only hypocritical, but hypocritical and self-righteous at the same time, all right? And so the bureaucracies of Judaism and Christianity have not taken the people's part in resisting the totalitarian tiptoe of the deep state and the Marxist government civil takedowns. The churches have not just winked at it, but just shrugged and said, well, there's nothing we can do. Well, there's plenty. There's plenty that can be done. And one of the things that can be done is called the sanctification of the people. You make the people safe by helping the people become wise, okay? And so the first thing you have to do is pull your children away from the state, and you do not allow the state to teach your children. No. If you want to have a bloodline and you want to have a future in that bloodline, you have to teach your children what your children need to know. Never mind the state, because the state is always pragmatic. The state always is tactical. The state will always do what they can to pull the child's loyalty away from family and culture and make the child indebted to the state, indebted or blackmailed. We have to keep our children close, or else we don't have a bloodline into the future. That's where we're going to come up again. If we leave here and come back, we have to come back in the same bloodline. Now, my producer, Steve, asked me about something today, and I wanted to share that with you because I just found it out myself a couple days ago. Oops, there we go. And it's about the soul. Remember, Jesus said once, do not fear those who can kill the body, but fear the ones who can kill the soul. Remember that? Okay. All right, come on. Da-da-da. Here we go. I've got a document here. And this is what I found out recently about that. Lucifer's collective methods of death dealing to populations can affect their living souls. just as our relationship to Yahweh personally affects our ability to remember our interactions with him in the past. Okay. The method of dealing death to populations affects the living souls, either left intact, fragmented, or winked out completely. So let's regard different outcomes. Individuals who die in their sleep may never awaken. Likewise, those who die in boredom, ennui, or catatonia are very likely to wink out entirely. And this is why it's not a good idea to put the elders in a nursing home, because the nursing home environment incites boredom, depression, and surrender. Just for your information. Those who die in suicide, plague, or great pain will separate from their pain and emerge either in pieces or intact or fragmented. Okay. COVID-19 is fragmenting souls because of the pain that's felt in the lungs. So COVID-19 is not a good way to go. Those who die instantaneously may not be aware that they died not at all. Or they may be so shattered that they wink out completely. Dying by violence is an uncertain outcome. Dying by execution generally leaves the soul intact. Those who die in terror and who contract like this wink out and never alight again. They're gone and their soul is gone. In Jesus' day, these details about effects of death upon the soul were not yet known. And government mind control programs like MCRA, Ultra, and Monarch, and so on, probably already know this if they cared, but I don't believe they care. The government bureaucracy is known for not caring about personal elements of existence and non-existence. And that simple fact of their policies is played out perfectly in the Iron Mountain Conference report, which is 2.5 hours long. You can find it on there are several versions of it on YouTube and the other places where you can put up videos. And you see how cynical the mentality of the deep state is. Now, you know, the deep state is not just the government bureaucracies who aid and abet corporations who are defense contractors who make all their money on war profiteering, gun running, drug running, and human trafficking. You see, our mid-level bureaucracy has become seeded with white-collar crime now. And the fact that William Barr and Chris Wray are not prosecuting the heinous crimes that are being uncovered says volumes about how bureaucracies become so embittered and so planted in their favoritism that they don't care about the results of human activity anymore. All right. So basically, the overkill reaction is the deep state reaction. It's the totalitarian, the Marxist reaction, the tear down whatever you don't prefer reaction. And it is alive and well in our society today. And in order to oppose that impulse, to just simply destroy or take out what you don't happen to prefer, what cultures have done in the past to protect themselves from that impulse is to collect themselves into an autonomous, self-sufficient family grouping around a single vocation or business or trade or agriculture, collect themselves into a single social entity against the rest of the world, which is what the Anabaptists have done, and the Catholic convents and monasteries, and there are Anglican monasteries too. There are about 100 of them in the British Isles. Okay, so there are lots of monasteries and communities of one purse, and a community of one purse is the way that Jesus taught was going to oppose and hopefully bring to an end today the deep state, the empire's overkill policies, along with their protection racketeering policies and their treachery in which the individuals embedded in the deep state, they say one thing publicly and they do something else privately. And also the divide and conquer strategies of the not only the mainstream media and the movies and the fiction, but also in academia, because academia teaches theories, taxonomies, and ontological arguments. You will not find, except in the chemistry department and maybe in mechanical engineering, laws of causes and effects. And so this is why some geeks have a handle on how behavior affects results, effects and outcomes. But whereas the arts and the people who are embedded in rhetoric and communications and law can talk themselves in circles forever and not really get anywhere, all right? We have to be up to date on the laws of cause and effect, how a behavior has an outcome. And the reason, what I do with that is I put up the Moses laws that he gave, and not just the first 10, because the first 10 were generalities, but the rest of them, 254 of them, are very specific, okay? If you do this, you get a good outcome. If you refrain from doing that, you get a good outcome. If you make a mistake, you fix it and you get a good outcome, all right? Those are the laws that are going to help us as a civil society remain a civil society. Let your yes mean yes. Let your no mean no. He who is faithful in what is least is faithful also in much, okay? So our behavior is what is going to determine whether our civil society is going to persist or not. It's not what we're thinking about fruit. It's not what we're thinking about doctrine or dogma, or was the Virgin Mary a virgin or not. None of that matters. What matters is, can we get along together? Can we agree on the conditions that are causing a problem so that we fix the problem? Okay. Can we get the dishonest people who are treacherous, creating protection rackets, like designing diseases at Fort Detrick, Maryland, so that they can then design the vaccines that are the product they can sell for money? Come on. This is crazy, right? We consumers are being consumed by the policies of the deep state and the left. And I think I've done it today. All right. I think I've ranted enough. But now I hope you realize that there's a difference between religion and philosophy. Philosophy is not personal. Philosophy will not get you to heaven. It will not get you into an afterlife. Okay? You can think all you want, and all of your prognostications and wishing around and head tripping is not going to spare your soul when your body wears out. Okay, when your body wears out, you're gone. If you want to have a life after this life, you have to be in a personal relationship with somebody who can give it to you. Okay, and that's the bottom line. We have to make amends with our Creator, the Planetary Sovereign, whose name happens to be Yahweh. He's been here over 26,000 years, and I think he's going to stay a while yet. So that's what I have for you today here at Facebook. And Steve,